All right, welcome everybody to this afternoon here at the Hickory Women's Expo. If you'd like to move to the front row, you're welcome to move on up here. And I am really excited to introduce our next speaker. So Leslie Keller is a native of Conover, North Carolina. She is an academically trained career museum professional, author, and historian with a Bachelor of Arts in History from Lenoir-Rhyne College, or Lenoir-Rhyne University right here in Hickory. She has a Master's of Arts in History from Wake Forest University and an MA in Public History and Museum Studies from Middle Tennessee State University. So her early professional work experience included curator at Travelers Rest Historic House Museum in Nashville, Tennessee, and a collections manager at Belle Meade Plantation in Nashville, Tennessee. Now, what I really like when I met Leslie and we were talking about Hickory in particular, that many times it's men's names that land in the history books. But, you know, for any strong man, there was a real strong woman behind him too. And I know Leslie has dug into that, and I'm very excited to see the replay, especially to see the replay on this. And I want to learn all the dirt of Hickory. So I think she's uncovered a lot of it. So let me welcome to the stage here, Leslie Keller.
Thank you. As Kate said, I'm going to be talking to you about the women who shaped Hickory's history. And I'll apologize in advance if I've left someone out you think should be included, because there are so many. Hickory, of course, started out growing up around Hickory Tavern. We were a stop on the stagecoach line. So then we got the railroad, and it started growing even more around the railroad. By 1886, Hickory was on the Yoder map of Catawba County with its 1 mile radius marked. Our city limits were a 1 mile radius from the depot that was there. The depot has moved a couple of times, not very far, but the concrete marker, that they had 4 concrete markers that marked the outside of this circle. One of them is still on campus at Lenoir-Rhyne. And I have to update that in my bio from college to university. It's been a while. This is what Main Street Hickory looked like in 1906, so you're starting to recognize Union Square. And the building on the left is attached to a large brick building that was built by Adolphus Shuford, so that is important. Our pioneer lady, of course, the one that I had to include is Mary Adelaide Lindsay Shuford. She was born in Guilford County to Dr. Robert Crawford Lindsay and Emily Doak. The fact that her father was a doctor, also important. Educated by a tutor, and then attended Greensboro Female College. In January of 1862, she came to visit her uncle in Hickory, or Hickory Station, and met Adolphus Shuford. And there's the handsome Adolphus Shuford. He was from a prominent Catawba County family, had a general store downtown, and apparently was quite impressive because by August 1862, they were married in High Point. They established a home in Hickory, and over the next 22 years, she gave birth to 12 children. The first 2 were born in High Point. They were born during the war. There was no doctor in Hickory, so she went home to her dad. I told you it was important he was a doctor. 7 of those 12 children survived to adulthood, so that was a pretty good ratio in that time. They moved from downtown Hickory out to the outskirts of town to start a Jersey cattle farm in the late 1870s, and they owned approximately 75 acres around Maple Grove. So out on 127, there was no development beyond that, no Viewmont at all. 3 of those children who survived to adulthood were daughters. Ella Doak Shuford Johnston, Nora Maud Shuford Self, and Florence Shuford Reed. Sadly, I've never found an image of Florence. And those daughters had to be educated. So Adolphus was very involved with the German Reformed Church, Corinth, and they built a college for girls, Claremont Female Academy, which was on the site of the current salt block. It's where the old high school of the Arts and Science Museum is. It's established in 1880 by the German Reformed Church and was based on the model of Wellesley College for Women. So Wellesley actually started in 1870, and the model included training women in maths and sciences. This is a copy of their course listings for 1902. So Claremont College was located in Hickory, a noted health resort. Apparently we had pure mountain air and water. I still don't think we're in the mountains, but finest conservatory of music in the South. And some of the courses that they offered were college level. Some were special, which I kind of take to be occupational, because the special ones included bookkeeping, shorthand, typing, also included music conservatory, art, and elocution, so little mix of everything. They had a primary department, a preparatory, and college department. And you can see in the photograph that there are children from the primary department. So there were young gentlemen who were able to be trained at the college for, while they were young. Also from 1902, I have a report card for Miss Gertrude May, and she was my great-grandmother. I'm happy to tell you that her score in history was an A. Algebra was a C and a C+. It's genetic. And deportment 100. So apparently we both know how to behave in public. Back to my Shuford ladies as the social leaders of Hickory. Edward was the oldest Shuford son, Edward Lindsay Shuford, and he married Magnolia McKay Shuford. She was his second wife. She was a cousin. They were pretty much the social arbiters of Hickory for a while. They lived in this lovely house, which is now really deteriorated, sad to say. And they were the center of high society. They hosted board and card games at their house. They were entertaining people and having euchre and high tea and all kinds of wonderful things. And from Edward's first marriage, he had a daughter, Lucille Shuford Bagby, and Magnolia and Edward had Catherine Shuford and Mary Rogers Shuford. That will be important with the founding of the DAR. The first DAR chapter in Hickory was the John Hoyle chapter, founded in February 1922, and that meeting was one of the first meetings at the new Hickory Municipal Building, which is now the Hickory Community Theater. So the DAR was organized. The regent was Mrs. E.L. Shuford, so that was Miss Magnolia. And 19 of the organizing members were descendants of Lieutenant John Hoyle. All 19 of those ladies were Shufords. So it was her sisters-in-law, her nieces, all of their daughters. And for quite some time, the members of that DAR chapter were descendants of Adolphus Shuford and his brothers and uncles. By about 1950, the other ladies in town who wanted to be members of the DAR founded the Hickory Tavern chapter. So Ms. Magnolia had quite the hold on the first DAR chapter. Hickory had a woman architect, which is interesting to me with Hickory Landmarks Society's concentration on the built environment. And it became even more interesting to me when I was working on the update of From Tavern to Town. The current Tavern to Town is the third volume, or third issue of that, third edition. The first edition was simply architectural description, a little bit of history of the building. The second issue was done by Albert Kaiser, local historian. Albert added a lot of genealogical information. We also edited out a couple of really good stories that Albert had. But by the third edition, Albert was not able to update that. I was supposed to help him on the update. He decided he couldn't do it, so I ended up doing that. And one thing that Albert had done was left out all the women's first names. It was Mrs. E.L. Shuford or Mrs. something something, but I was missing first names. So that was my mission, to find the first names of a lot of these ladies. And I was sitting at dinner with my extended family one evening and complaining about, I can't find the first name of this architect. I have no idea. I've looked at everything. I can't find a name. My brother-in-law looked up from his plate and said, her name was Fanny Belle Winkler. She happened to be his grandmother's sister. So you never know where you're going to find the clue that will lead you to this information. Fanny Belle Winkler was born and raised in Happy Valley near Lenoir. She graduated from Davenport College and began teaching in 1908. Davenport College was Lenoir's version of Claremont Female College, just a good bit earlier. She married, moved to Hickory in 1909. At various times, she served as secretary and treasurer of the Catawba County Fair and the Hickory Merchants Association. She was also a church organist and an artist. And the article says she's Hickory's woman architect, and as far as is known, she's the only woman architect in North Carolina. So that's Fanny Belle Winkler, known on every document of Hickory's history as Mrs. Q.E. Herman. So Q.E. is Quince Edward. He was born in the St. Stephen's community, so he was local, trained as an architect, and set up offices in Hickory in 1907. He specialized in designing schools and churches. Shared offices with his wife in the Harris Arcade, which they designed. The Blackwelder Riddle building, you might recognize the Hub Theater is now We Mountain Frame. So 3 freestanding buildings there in this photo, and we see a whole streetscape now. But those were designed by QE. The Hermans were also involved with the emergency polio hospital in 1944. He designed the wooden structures that are no longer there, and then they were built by Herman Site Construction. More than 40 houses in Hickory are attributed to, that were built by Crouch Lumber Company, are attributed to Mrs. Herman and Walter Jones. Q.E. Herman died in 1950. Mrs. Herman kept working with Walter Jones. She is referred to in the article as an architect, but never completed the formality of taking the state board. So she wasn't completely an architect. When Hickory Landmarks Society got the Crouch collection of house plans, there were all these plans that said Mrs. Q.E. Herman, Walter Jones. One of our volunteers who was going through those looked at me and said, referred to an old song. He said, I think maybe Mrs. Herman and Mr. Jones had a thing going on. Well, Mr. Jones was, in fact, her brother-in-law. She had a twin sister who had married Mr. Jones, and Mr. Jones was a structural engineer. So she designed, he made sure the buildings were going to stand, and many of them are still standing. When she passed away in 1962, she was buried with Mr. Herman at Miller's Lutheran Church, and he helped to build that as well. I think this was 1935. The cost of the church was $65,000. It's impressive for a church that size. Now, the preservationist is really my favorite. Frances Johnson Moody. Born in Indiana, studied at Indiana University and Ohio State University. She worked in many mediums, but ended up specializing in portrait bust. So she's seen here with David. She did a number of those. She did all kinds of things. There's a collection of Frances Moody works at the Hickory Museum of Art. With her husband, H. Leslie Moody, they established a porcelain company in Texas. But then there was some upheaval. They moved to Hickory in 1945 and opened Highland Porcelain. I apologize for the quality of the slide, but that's my picture of Highland. In our collection, we have some of her artwork, her designs for plates that were produced by Highland Porcelain. But her real love in later years was for historic preservation. She fell in love with one of the Victorian houses in Hickory and put together a committee with the help of Edna Beringer to save the Probst House. So that's what the J. Summey Probst House looked like when Hickory Landmarks acquired it. Vagrants had set fire to the tower after it was acquired. So Philip Gillison was the architect working with them. He told them it might be a good idea to simply light a match and burn the rest of it. But they raised the money to move it from its original site over to Shuford Park and restored it. They worked until 1979 before it was fully restored and opened to the public. And of course, it looks a little bit better than that now. After they acquired the Probst House, they were given Maple Grove. And as you can see from this caption, rumor has it that the building will soon face a demolition crew to make way for an apartment complex. So in 1970, Maple Grove was being auctioned off, and they feared that it would be torn down. Well, it was purchased and given to Hickory Landmarks Society, sat there for a good while before before they started raising the money to restore it. And at one point, the Mrs. Shuford that purchased it had her attorney send a letter to our board, which our board president was Frances Moody, asking if anything was going to be done with the house. They would like to see something done with the house. And Frances Moody sent a terse letter back to the attorney that didn't say this exactly, but in so many words said, if you'd like it back, you can have it. So we did manage to eventually restore that house. Local and statewide, Mrs. Moody was involved with, of course, Hickory Landmarks as co-founder, president of the board for 10 years. She helped to establish the Historic Preservation Commission and historic districts. She got everything surveyed and made sure that the buildings would be safeguarded somewhat. The original historic districts do have a local overlay, so it's Frances Moody's fault that if you own one of those buildings, you have to go to the Historic Preservation Commission and get permission to do something to the exterior. But the buildings are still standing, so that is the important part. She also served on the Historic Preservation Foundation of North Carolina, which I believe is now PNC, Preservation North Carolina. Hickory Landmarks' mission is to serve the Hickory region by leading in the protection of historically and architecturally significant individual landmarks, neighborhoods, and traditions. We do this by means of education, advocacy, property management, and ensuring responsible historic preservation as part of community growth. We have acquired more buildings since Mrs. Moody's time. Houck's Chapel is one of our buildings that's open for tours by appointment. We also own the parsonage that's in Sally Fox Park, where the Women's Resource Center is, and most recently, the Clement Geithner House, where Jenny's Gifts is. And we have programming coming up. This is the ad for Artbeat. So we have a membership campaign kicking off next month, and we're going to get the Probst House open for Halloween for the first time and do Landmarks Christmas at all of our properties. So there's the places that you can stay up to date with us. And today we have some of our publications in our booth if you'd like to stop by, if you have any questions or would just like to chat with us. Thank you. Thank you.